Welcome to Zoe Stories. My mom's experiment left me as her daughter. The ticking of the clock filled the silence of my dimly lit bedroom. It was nearly 10 p.m. The house was empty, just the way I liked it when I needed to indulge in my secret. My name is Ryan, a 22-year-old engineering student, the kind of guy you'd pass by on the street without a second glance. To the world, I was just another average young man, someone who studied hard, played video games in his free time, and spent his weekends with his girlfriend, Emma. But there was another side of me, a side no one knew about, a side I had spent years hiding, terrified of what would happen if anyone found out. I crossdressed. It had started as curiosity when I was younger, a passing interest and experiment. But as I grew older, it became something more, something I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I tried. It wasn't just about the clothes. It was about the feeling, the sense of freedom, of stepping outside the rigid expectations of who I was supposed to be. And yet, it was also my greatest source of fear. Because if Emma ever found out, if my friends, or worse, my mom, ever discovered the truth, I had no doubt that my life would change forever. A quiet house, a dangerous opportunity. Tonight was a rare opportunity. My mom had left for a 3-day science conference, and Emma was out with her friends, meaning I had the entire house to myself. I wouldn't have to worry about anyone barging in unexpectedly. No risk of getting caught. For the first time in weeks, I could be myself. My heart pounded as I walked toward my closet, but not because I was scared. I was excited. I knelt beside my dresser, reached underneath, and pulled out the old shoebox I kept hidden in the very back. Inside, neatly folded and carefully concealed, were the clothes I had collected over the years: dresses, skirts, blouses, lingerie. A forbidden wardrobe. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric, letting the silky material slip between them. It was intoxicating. I pulled out a dress, a deep red one that I had only worn once before. The color was bold, daring, nothing like the dull jeans and hoodies I wore in my everyday life. Just touching it sent shivers down my spine. This wasn't just about putting on a dress. This was about transformation. Growing up, I always did what was expected of me. I got good grades, followed the rules, and never caused trouble. I wasn't the type of guy who stood out. If anything, I blended into the background, another ordinary student in a sea of ordinary people. But beneath the surface, I had always felt different. It started when I was a kid. My mom was a scientist, always locked away in her lab, running experiments for her research. I was left alone a lot, and in those quiet hours, my curiosity led me to places I never expected. One day, when I was around 10, I found an old dress of hers shoved into the back of the closet. It was nothing special, just a simple blue sundress, but something about it called to me. I remember hesitating before slipping it on. The moment the fabric touched my skin, something inside me shifted. It felt right, and yet it also terrified me. I knew, even back then, that this wasn't something boys were supposed to do. I shoved the dress back into the closet and tried to forget about it. But I never really could. Over the years, the desire grew stronger. I started sneaking into my mom's room when she wasn't home, trying on different outfits in front of the mirror. I didn't understand why I felt this way, only that it made me feel whole in a way nothing else ever did. But as I got older, shame took over. I buried that part of myself, locking it away just like I had hidden that first dress. I forced myself to act like every other guy. I dated girls, played sports, pretended I was normal. And then I met Emma. Emma was everything I was supposed to want in a girlfriend. She was beautiful, confident, and ambitious. She had big plans for the future and expected the same from me. She believed in hard work, in pushing yourself, in being the best version of who you were meant to be. And she hated liars. She had told me once, early in our relationship, that the one thing she couldn't stand was dishonesty. If you ever hide something from me, she had said, I'd rather hear the truth, no matter how bad it is. Her words haunted me every time I looked at her. Would she still love me if she knew my secret? Would she still see me the same way if she knew that beneath the hoodies and jeans, beneath the persona I had carefully crafted, was someone who longed to wear dresses and makeup? I didn't have an answer, and I wasn't ready to find out. I shook the thoughts away and focused on the moment.
Tonight was about me.
I undressed quickly, my hands trembling with anticipation as I slipped into the red dress. The fabric hugged my body in all the right ways, clinging to me, molding me into something new. I turned to the mirror. The person staring back at me wasn't Ryan. She was someone else entirely. A different version of me. A better version? Maybe. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, lost in my reflection. But then, the moment was shattered. Because just as I reached for my makeup bag, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A key turning in the front door. Emma wasn't supposed to be back yet. Panic surged through me as I stared at my reflection one last time. There was no time to change. No time to hide. The door creaked open downstairs, and I heard Emma's voice calling my name. I was trapped. Ryan's heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. He stood frozen in place, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The red dress clung to his body, the silky fabric molding to his form. His face was bare. He hadn't had time to put on any makeup, but there was no mistaking what he had done. And now Emma was home. Ryan. Her voice rang out from downstairs. Panic surged through him. She wasn't supposed to be back for another 3 hours. What was she doing here? Had she forgotten something? Had her plans changed? It didn't matter. He had seconds to figure out what to do. His mind raced. Option 1. Rip off the dress, throw on his usual clothes, and pretend like nothing happened. Option 2. Lock the door and pray she didn't get suspicious. Option 3. Try to hide. None of them were perfect, and none of them guaranteed safety. But he had no time to think. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor, growing closer. Ryan scrambled. He tore the dress off in a frenzy, his hands shaking as he yanked his hoodie over his head. The fabric tangled around his arms, and for a horrifying second, he thought he wouldn't be able to get it on in time. Then knock, knock, knock. Ryan, are you in there? His heart stopped. Yeah. He tried to keep his voice steady. Just give me a second. A pause. Silence stretched between them. Then Emma sighed. Can you open the door? I left my charger in here. Ryan's stomach twisted into knots. His eyes darted around the room. His dress was crumpled on the floor. His bra and wig were sitting on the bed. If Emma came inside, she'd see everything. Think, Ryan, think. Hold on, I'm changing. That, at least, wasn't a lie. Another pause. Then, since when do you care if I see you shirtless? His blood ran cold. She was suspicious. This is bad. Ryan forced a laugh. I just got out of the shower. I'm naked. Emma let out an exaggerated groan.
Ugh. Fine.
But hurry up, okay? She was still standing there, still waiting. Ryan knew he didn't have much time. He lunged for the dress, stuffed it under his mattress, then grabbed the bra and wig and shoved them into his drawer. His heart was racing so fast he thought it might explode. Deep breath.
Stay calm.
He walked to the door, turned the lock, and opened it just enough to poke his head out. Emma was standing there with her arms crossed. You're acting weird. Ryan forced a smile. I was just getting dressed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she brushed past him and walked toward his nightstand. Ryan nearly passed out from sheer panic. She was inches away from the drawer where he had shoved his bra. If she opened it, everything was over. His stomach twisted, but she didn't open it. Instead, she grabbed her charger, tossed him a curious glance, and walked back toward the door. Ryan exhaled, his entire body sagging with relief. But then she stopped. She turned back toward him, her gaze lingering on his bed. His heart started pounding again as he followed her gaze and saw what she was looking at. The wig. It wasn't fully inside the drawer. A few golden strands of hair peeked out. Ryan's throat went dry.
For a second, he thought she was going to ask.
Thought she was going to walk over and investigate. But then she shrugged. Okay, she said, flashing him a smile. I'll see you tomorrow. And just like that, she was gone. The front door closed behind her. Ryan collapsed onto his bed, his entire body trembling. That was too close. Way too close. He stared at the ceiling, his heart still hammering against his ribs. What the hell was he doing? How long could he keep this up before everything came crashing down? For the first time, he wasn't sure if he had an answer. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying what had happened. The close call. The thrill. The way his heart had raced when he was standing in front of the mirror, wearing that red dress. It should have scared him. But instead, all he could think about was doing it again. He wanted more. He wanted to take it further. And the more he thought about it, the more an idea began to form in his mind. What if he didn't just dress up in secret? What if he went outside? The thought made his stomach twist with both fear and excitement. It was reckless, stupid, insanely dangerous. But that only made it more tempting. He had spent years hiding, years suppressing this side of himself. Maybe it was time to take a risk. The next evening, Ryan sat in front of his mirror, staring at his reflection. This time he wasn't rushing. This time he wanted to do it right. He pulled out his makeup bag, took a deep breath, and began. Foundation first. Then concealer. Then blush. Each brushstroke felt like a step toward someone new. Someone bolder. Someone who didn't have to hide. By the time he was finished, he barely recognized himself. The person staring back at him wasn't Ryan. She was someone else entirely. She needed a name. Riley, he whispered to himself. Yes, Riley. That was who he was tonight.
And tonight?
Riley was going to step outside. Ryan, no. Riley stood in front of the door, heart hammering against his ribcage. The world outside was dark and quiet. Streetlights cast a faint glow on the empty sidewalks, and the distant hum of traffic filled the night air. It was late enough that most people were inside, meaning there would be fewer eyes on him. It was the perfect time to do this. But still, he hesitated. His fingers hovered over the doorknob, his breath shallow. This was insane. All his life, he had lived by one rule: don't get caught. And yet, here he was, about to walk outside dressed as someone completely different. Dressed as her. He took a deep breath and glanced at his reflection in the hallway mirror. The transformation was unreal. The girl looking back at him was nothing like Ryan. Her golden blonde wig cascaded in soft waves down her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, foundation perfectly blended, lips painted a deep red, eyes accentuated with eyeliner and mascara. She wore a short black dress that hugged her frame, paired with a cropped jacket and sheer tights. On her feet were a pair of black heels, modest, but still enough to make her legs look longer and more feminine. She looked beautiful. And yet, beneath all of that, he was still in there.
A guy.
A fraud. His stomach twisted. What if someone could tell? What if he got caught? But another thought followed, one far more dangerous. What if he didn't? What if he could really pull this off? The idea sent a thrill through him. It was time to find out. Before he could talk himself out of it, he grabbed his purse, swung the door open, and stepped outside. The night air was crisp against his skin as he walked down the street. He forced himself to keep his pace steady, his posture confident. Don't look nervous. Don't draw attention to yourself. He kept his head high and his steps graceful, the way he had seen women walk 1,000 times before. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. No one stared. No one pointed. No one even noticed him. And that was when it hit him he was passing. The realization sent a shiver down his spine. For the first time in his life, he wasn't hiding in his bedroom. He wasn't just pretending in front of a mirror. He was out here, in public, as Riley. And no one knew. A rush of exhilaration surged through him. This was dangerous. This was reckless. And yet, he had never felt so alive. He had planned to just walk around the block once and go home. A small step. A quick taste of freedom. But then, he saw the neon sign of a small cafe up ahead, its warm glow spilling onto the sidewalk. People were inside, laughing, talking, completely unaware of the world outside. A normal night. A normal place. For normal people. And in that moment, Riley wanted to be one of them. Before he could stop himself, he was walking toward the door. His hands were shaking as he reached for the handle. This was it. The ultimate test. He stepped inside. The scent of coffee and vanilla filled the air. The soft hum of conversation surrounded him. No one looked up. No one stared. He was just another girl in a cafe. He walked up to the counter, trying to ignore the way his pulse was racing. The barista, a guy about his age, smiled at him. "Hey there. What can I get you?" For a second, Riley panicked. His voice. He hadn't thought about his voice. If he spoke too deep, he'd be exposed instantly. He swallowed hard and forced his voice to be softer, breathier. "Just a latte, please." The guy didn't flinch, didn't react, just nodded and punched in the order. Ryan nearly collapsed from sheer relief. Everything was perfect. For the first time in his life, Riley felt like she was real. Not just an idea. Not just a fantasy. A person. But then, disaster struck. Just as he was about to take his coffee and leave, the worst possible thing happened. Emma walked in. Ryan's stomach dropped. Oh, God. Oh, God. She hadn't seen him yet. She was standing in line, talking to a friend, her head turned away. But she was right there. One glance. One wrong move. And it would all be over. Ryan's mind went blank. Think. He couldn't just leave. She might notice him. He couldn't stay. She might come closer. His only option? Blend in. Act like Riley. Be her. Ryan forced himself to sit down at a corner table, turning slightly away from the entrance. His hands trembled as he picked up his coffee. Emma was laughing, chatting with her friend, completely unaware. But that could change at any second. Ryan kept his head down, praying she wouldn't look his way. Seconds felt like hours. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. All it would take was one wrong glance. And then, "Excuse me?" Ryan jumped. A man had approached his table, smiling at him. He was in his mid-30s, dressed in a suit, with an easy, confident grin. Ryan's stomach churned. "Oh, no.
Not now.
Not this." "I just wanted to say," the man continued, "you're absolutely stunning." Ryan's brain short-circuited. Was this really happening? Was he being hit on? Panic flooded his veins. He needed to get out.
Now.
He forced a smile, muttered a polite thanks in the softest voice he could manage, and grabbed his purse. He needed to leave before. Too late. Emma turned. Their eyes met. Ryan's world collapsed. For a second, she didn't react. Then, slowly, her expression changed. Confusion. Realization.
Shock.
Ryan's body went ice cold. The man was still talking, oblivious to what was happening. But Ryan couldn't hear a word. All he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears. All he could see was Emma, staring at him like she had just seen a ghost. Then, "Ryan." The word cut through the air like a knife. A whisper. A question. A bomb about to explode. Ryan ran. He shoved past the man, practically sprinting out the door, his heels clicking wildly against the pavement. He didn't stop. Didn't look back. Didn't breathe. He ran until his legs burned, until his lungs screamed for air. Until he was home. Until he was safe. But as he slammed the door shut behind him, his chest heaving, he knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. Ryan collapsed against the door, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His entire body was trembling. His wig was slipping, a few strands of his real hair peeking out from underneath. His lipstick was smudged. His heels felt like lead weights strapped to his feet. But none of that mattered. Because Emma knew. She had seen him, recognized him. And worst of all, she had said his name. His mind was racing, trying to come up with some way to explain this, some excuse that would make this all go away. But there was no excuse. No way out. The truth was out there now, hanging between them like a storm cloud ready to break. And then, a knock at the door.
Soft.
Hesitant, but deafening in the silence. Ryan's stomach twisted into knots.
No.
She hadn't followed him. She wouldn't have. Knock. His entire body went rigid. She was here. She had come after him. Panic surged through his veins. He couldn't face her like this. Not in this dress. Not with his makeup smeared and his heels still on. But he had no choice. If he didn't answer, she would keep knocking. And the longer he waited, the worse it would get. Taking a deep breath, he reached for the doorknob with a shaking hand. Then he opened it. Emma stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something else. Something unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, charged with unspoken words and emotions neither of them were ready to face. Then, finally, Ryan. His name sounded different coming from her lips now.
Softer.
More uncertain. Like she wasn't even sure who she was talking to anymore. Ryan swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet her gaze. Emma? Was that really you? She interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. His throat tightened. What was he supposed to say? That she was imagining things? That she had been mistaken? He wanted to lie. To tell her that it wasn't him. That she was wrong. But he couldn't. Not anymore. Because she knew. And there was no going back. His lips parted, the words forming on his tongue, words that could change everything. But before he could say anything, Emma stepped inside and closed the door. And just like that, his secret life was over.